Hello. Good evening, everyone. Please let me know if you can hear me. I think we've got a few dialers in. Hello. Good evening, Michael. Good evening, Olushola. Good evening, Michael. Well, that's Michael still. And Kebe. Awesome. I believe we are live. We're going to give it a minute or two before we get going and give everybody an opportunity to dial in to get over any technical issue they might have in terms of getting it going. So just give it 2 more minutes or a minute even, and then we'll get going. Thank you for confirming you can hear me. That's fantastic. Really helpful. Just give it a few more minutes. People still coming in on the chat. And do us a favor, if you're live as well, please be sure to share it, the live link, in your networks, on your social media, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. It really helps to get the word out and to get your contacts who potentially are interested in what you're interested in to see what we are up to. Really exciting session we've got planned today. And yeah, we'll get going in a few minutes. People still coming in. Don't want anyone to miss out on this one. Okay, I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds. Anyone who's just come in, please be sure to say hello in the chat so we know you're here, so I know you can hear me. And I've hit my number to get cracking. Awesome. Okay, so we are live. Good evening, everyone. This the 14th of August for this episode of the Dari.io Fireside Connect, titled Navigating the DevOps Landscape. You might have noticed something. Dari hasn't all of a sudden developed fantastic hair or anything like that. Unfortunately, Dari cannot be with us today. Okay, we've got some audio issues on Facebook. Priscilla, please let me look into that. I'm not sure what's happening there, but we've got a comment saying they can't hear me on Facebook. Anyone on Facebook, please confirm. But yeah, sadly, Dari cannot be with us today. He is involved and unavailable due to another pressing technical matter or project that he's having to work on. So today, for the first time, I have attended a few sessions. I'll be standing in, but you haven't got to deal with me all the way through. We've got some really fantastic names and members that will be paneling and navigating the conversation today around the landscape of DevOps. As we tend to do, we have this every 2 weekly. Soon it's probably going to be every month, where we get together and we have an opportunity as a community to share and learn from each other as far as what we're working on, any sort of challenges we're currently facing, but also to offer and pitch any issues or challenges you might have to the panelists we might have, and typically Dari. And today we're privileged to have two individuals, one you've met before, who are really experienced as far as DevOps is concerned. And I'll let them, introduce themselves first. First, we'll have Shub, who you might have met before, but Shub, being a friend of the family, has worked with Dari.io many times before in a mentor capacity, actually delivering some sessions to help you guys out as well. So he's going to be sharing and navigating the conversation with our key panelist today, a guy by the name of Viktor Farcic, dialing in from Barcelona. I'll let him introduce himself, and I'm sure Shub will do so too. But Victor is what they call an OG, right? An established figure as far as the DevOps and technical environment is concerned. He's a leading voice in the world of DevOps. He's a strategist when it comes to DevOps, an advisor to many startups, and actually has a pretty successful 2 to 3 year old YouTube channel. So he's very versed and very experienced, very supportive of everybody who's in the space, who's considering getting into the space, and offers his help all the way through as much as possible. At some point in the conversation, Priscilla, if you could help me to share Victor's LinkedIn link, I think it was on a post as well. Feel free to connect. He's a super individual. It's great to connect with as you navigate the course of DevOps. So how this will work is I'll bring Shub on first, do a quick intro into who he is, his background, so we can recap, just in case you haven't met him before. Say hello if you're in the chat as well. And then after that, I will bring on Victor himself. And subsequently, Victor and Shub will dive deep into the subject matter of navigating the DevOps landscape. So first of all, let me bring on Shub, who will introduce himself, and then we can move on from there. Shub, you there?
Hi, everyone. Hey, Jonas. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
I'm good. Excellent. Looking forward to this one.
Sorry?
Really looking forward to this one.
I'm sure you are. So if you could, please, just for those who haven't attended before, please introduce yourself super quickly, what you've done, what you do, how you're a friend of the family, and anything else that you feel is relevant. And then we can kind of go from there.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Shubham, and I'm working as a systems engineer with Trivago. We are a hotel meta search company which provides 1 million hotels, and we help you, find the right deals for your hotels there across many different platforms. You might have heard about us. If you are in Europe, that's where we basically are based out of. And working as a systems engineer, I'm mostly responsible for our cloud and the data center workloads, kind of creating a hybrid platform between the cloud and the data center, so the developers don't feel where are we running. It should be agnostic to them. So we kind of help them navigate with golden paths. We kind of help them navigate onboarding the applications, helping them freeing up their mind from what is Kubernetes in the end. So that's what I'm working on. And I'm really looking forward to this chat going on here. I've been here with Daddy.io before, which I think it's a really good platform for everyone to learn and actually know the skills which are needed. Not just DevOps is a bridge between developer and operations, but it's actually a lot more than that. So I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. Now I'm going to bring on Victor, but I said it was an OG. And could you do your version of an introduction to Victor, as you know him, so we can appreciate how much of a value he is and how much of a privilege it is that he's spending some time with us this evening.
Absolutely. I mean, in a day-to-day work, when you work in your company, there are many problems that you face, maybe a new technology, maybe something in the existing one that you might not know about. So my first way of finding out is I go to YouTube, I type the technology, and then I hit DevOps Toolkit, which is his YouTube channel. There are many chances that he would have a video on that. And I, including a lot of people, we still learn from him. So as you said, he is the OG. And something that we always, can look forward to and look up to for learning and the contributions that he has been doing in the open source community. So that's my version of it.
That's right. So you heard it from the engineer talking about the engineer OG. So with that said, I'm super chuffed to introduce Victor onto the stage now. Welcome, Victor.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Wonderful. It's a privilege to have you. And thank you for taking the time out of sunny Barcelona. You're aware of the background of what we do. And as I said earlier on, guys, get your questions ready anyway. But this is going to be an opportunity for you and Shub to wax lyrical. But before you do, please give us an overview as to your current role, what you do, your journey so far, bringing you to this point, and anything you think is pertinent for the listeners that we have here today.
Everything that is pertinent, that would be tough. But here's a short version, right? My name is Viktor. I work in Upbound. That's a company behind Crossplane. And for quite a long time now, including right now, I'm focused mostly on community, right? Open source, helping people in one way or another, right? There are many different ways, but I'm fully community-driven person, let's say.
Awesome, awesome. And I know you got a long version of it. How long have you been doing it? You know, maybe tell us a bit about your YouTube, what your passions are generally. I'm not from Shoob's questions, just to set the scene for the listeners.
I mean, how long I've been doing it depends. I mean, so the first piece of software I sold was when I was 15, and that was 35 years ago, right? So I'm an old geezer, right? And I'm not. It's a long career, right? And I've done almost everything since I get bored very fast. So I've been developer, I've been tester, I've been manager, I've been technical something, I've been VP something. So I've done everything. Not because I'm trying to climb some ladder or something like that. I just get bored and then I change what I do and then I do something else. So it would be a long list if I would start naming all the random things I did, right?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, everyone can find you. We're going to share your LinkedIn and everyone kind of, can kind of find you. But I guess I've been trying to make everyone understand that, whilst we have conversations about the cloud, some people are actually part of the cloud rising. And you're one of those guys who did that, right? So as I say, it's a wonderful privilege to have you here. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity. So you've seen a set of questions already. So at this point, I'll probably take a little bit of a step back and allow you and Shub to kind of go through some of the questions designed for you listeners to understand the subject around navigating DevOps. So please get your questions ready and make any comments you wish to in the comments. By all means, Shub, please proceed.
All right, Jonas, I would go with the first one. So Victor, where you actually stopped saying about your history, this is where I kind of wanted to start from, that all of us came in this DevOps field while it was actually going on, right? While it was booming, when a lot of things were coming out. You had infrastructure as code, you had containers, you had Kubernetes and all that. And we kind of ride on the train at the very right time, maybe 5 or 6 years back. That was when it was really booming. But you say you have had about 35 years of experience, and you were there when DevOps wasn't even a word that was coined, right? But that was the case, isn't it?
Yeah. So DevOps as a word is relatively new, but the logic behind it, at least in a way how I see it, is not new at all, right? I would go as far, and this is going to be outrageous, to say that actually the way I see it is that DevOps is attempt to redefine what Agile is. And I know that everybody's going to freak out now, but so I think that the whole point of DevOps, and before DevOps Agile, and before Agile, whatever we were calling it back then, was to break the silos, right? How can we enable teams to be productive, to be self-sufficient, to be able to do what needs to be done, to bring their application from the beginning all the way until it is in production, right? And now then we have different terms to explain that, right? If you look at Agile from a certain perspective, you can say, hey, Agile is all about forming those teams that have the capacity to move forward without actually depending on other teams. It's just that in Agile people, in interpretation of Agile people, they forgot that there are operations over there somewhere, sitting in a basement, right? So kind of usually they form the teams with developers and testers and some product manager that got renamed into product owner. And with DevOps, we're just extending that idea, actually implementation of that idea. Hey, actually, you cannot just write code and just test it and just plan it. You need to go further. You need to deliver it. You need to reach production somehow, right?
Absolutely.
So that's how I see DevOps. DevOps is about bridging that gap and creating teams that are capable of moving independently of other teams.
True. I mean, there's still someone in the data center or someone sitting in front of their computers in the black screen doing something. It's not all magic that's going on, right? Maybe you change the time for them. It's still there.
Oh yeah, it's still there, and it's never going to go away, and the complexity is still there. And I don't expect teams, when I say self-sufficient, to spend 3 years learning AWS and 7 years learning Kubernetes. But I do expect other teams in a company to create the tools and the means for those teams to be self-sufficient, meaning bring it on the level that is sufficient for them without going into details.
Right. So, as you mentioned that there would be someone who cannot learn Kubernetes just in 1 year, 2 years, as being a developer while they are also building the application, taking out time, going through plethora of videos, learning so many tools, which is exactly what DevOps was. You build it, you own it. But in your opinion, has it really happened? Like as a developer, can I do all of that, or do I still need some people who are building the infrastructure for me? Is it really happening? How do you see that?
So I don't want people to build anything for me. What I do want is people to create a service that I can consume so that I can build it myself, right? So it's like, let's say, managing resources in AWS, and I'm using that as an example, right? That's very complex. It takes a lot of time to figure it out, a lot of time to assemble it, and so on and so forth. But that does not mean that I cannot give a button to others, right? Kind of, hey, you want a cluster or you want a database, fill in those 3 fields, right, in a UI or in a YAML or whatever. These are the things that matter to you, and consume it as a service, right? So I feel that where we are going, and some are already there, it's all about creating services, right? Your services can be for end consumers, like if you're on a front end, you're creating a service for the end users, for those who pay you. And if you're working on something internally, you're still creating a service. It's just that the consumers of that service are people in your company.
Yeah, exactly. They're the people who you share a coffee with every day. You meet with them. They're in the same building. It's just that they are your customers, and now you are creating a product. You're creating a project with a product mindset, and you are selling it to them. And
I think that's the key. That every single team should be creating a product for customers. And I couldn't care less whether those customers are internal or external, or they're here or they're there. You're creating a product, and you're treating it as a product, and others are consuming it. It's that simple, right? And we've been trying that for a long, long time, and the vast majority of us never got there. Just to be clear, it's not easy. It's hard, but that's the goal, nevertheless.
I mean, I can definitely agree with you on that, because today I finished a Jira ticket where somebody asked me to do something. I know what you're saying, the pain that is there. The processes should be automated. Behind that, we're actually using Rancher, and there was a customer who wanted to use our internal Kubernetes platform offering that we are using. And I think that could be solved by a service where they don't come to us and say, I want a project on Rancher. Could you give me that? But rather they can have it themselves. I think that's what you are advocating about, right?
Yes and no, in a way. So the danger in trying to build services that will be consumed internally is that you cannot do it with the existing tools that are good for you, right? So let's say that I'm a security expert, or maybe I'm a person that knows Kubernetes inside out, right? I have tools for me, like you mentioned, Rancher. There are many others, right? And they're for me, they're for my level of experience. But I cannot give those same tools to others and say, go, right?
Exactly.
Because they were not designed for them. I need some other type of interface, right? Something that is simple, that has all the best practices baked in, that has the processes, how we do things in our company baked in, and yet exposing some different level of abstraction. I think we can summarize probably what I'm talking about is trying to figure out what is the right level of abstraction for each one of us, right? If you're focused on X, then your level of abstraction will be lower, right? Maybe you will be working directly on Linux kernel level, right? But then when you say, hey, my job is something else, but I still need a machine, right? Then your abstraction level is different.
Absolutely. So you somewhere would draw a line where what do you want to sell to the customers there, and how easy you want to make it for them, because let's be honest, they don't know things that we do, and they should also not know about it. That's the thing.
Good. So right now I'm actually in introduction. You were told that I'm in Barcelona. I'm actually 100 and something kilometers from Barcelona, right? And I took a car and came here, hour and something drive, right? Now, if I would translate that experience, how we do things in a company, I would say, you know what? First, I'm going to pour concrete over 100 and something kilometers and build a road, right?
True.
And then I'm going to put gas stations because, and so on and so forth. No, I don't want to do any of those things. That does not mean that I don't want to drive a car, right? That does not mean that I need a chauffeur to do it for me. I want to be self-sufficient, but I still don't want to go into all the details because I honestly don't know how to build a highway. I don't know how to do that.
And I think that makes total sense. And that's where you can go. This is my abstraction that I don't want to get, the highway building myself. You could go to another abstraction level where you can say, I don't want to drive the car myself. I maybe just order from my phone, maybe an Uber, and then I just get back. Just get me there. I don't care which paths you take. I just want to go from here to there within this time. You are being declarative, which is all about what we do, right? We be declarative rather than telling, take this path, drive that way.
Exactly. But the key over there, what you just said, is that we cannot do those things by removing the choice. You cannot say the only way to get where you are, Victor, is Uber, right?
True.
You need to give me there is the option of Uber, right? There is the option of driving myself. There is the option of bicycling if I want to, right? There are different options, and I need to have those options. And then I'm going to choose, not you, right? I am going to choose which option works best for me.
True. That's absolutely true. And I think the way we are discussing about it, we keep on using the word platform, a service. There should be an abstraction. I think this is going towards the question that I had, another one, which is an internal developer platform, which I've seen you advocating very vocally about. And I do get there's a really big benefit to it. But would you mind diving a bit more deeper for our people who are here? Like, what is an IDP? How I know cross-plane, but probably these people might not know about it. But if you can just spare some time on that.
Yeah. So the short answer is that IDP is everything. Is a collection of everything, right? Again, with different levels of abstraction. But before, let me actually backtrack for a second, right? This is similar story, at least in my head, like DevOps, right? Let's not fool ourselves. We've been building, when I say we, as an industry, right? We've been building internal platforms for decades now, right? I was heavily involved in Jenkins, for example, a long time ago. And companies were using Jenkins as internal platform. You go there, you click a button, maybe you fill in some few input fields, and then something happens, right? Behind the scenes, pipeline would execute this or that, and so on and so forth, right? And this is just one example, but companies have been building tools that help others accomplish certain tasks for a very, very long time. So it's not new. The name is new, right? We call it now internal developer platforms. And what really, I think that in ideal situation, there are a zillion ways to build internal developer platform. But my approach to that is similar like building any other type of services, right? Let's forget about platform for a second. Let's say that we are building an application. How would we do that application? We would create a backend. We would have maybe some storage for that backend. We would expose that backend through an API, and we would build a frontend, right? And frontend would do nothing but talk to that API. Frontends don't do much. They're just graphical representation of what APIs give them, right? Any web application anybody ever did, unless you were using Java something that, before you jumped into JavaScript. Every application, at least today, is following that same logic, right? Backend, API, frontend, optional storage, right? And the way I see it, platforms are like that, right? First and the biggest mistake I feel that people make is that they start with the front end because that's a visible thing, right? First, I'm going to build a platform by using Backstage. And Backstage is a great tool. So nothing against Backstage, but that's the end of it, right? First, you create a backend. You say, okay, so what are we going to enable people to do? Manage databases, excellent. How are we going to do that? Create some process that runs somewhere, exposes itself through an API, and then people can invoke that API. How do they invoke it? I don't care. And this is the important part, right? You want the CLI, you get the CLI. You want Visual Studio Code, you get Visual Studio Code. You want a web UI, that's fine as well, right? We can build all those things because all those things become easy once you have a service that exposes an API. It's it's not easy to do what I'm saying, but conceptually, it is straightforward. Backend, API, frontend. That's all there is to it, right? Now, the important part in all that is what I said before, right? Do not expose existing tools to everybody else because that's overwhelming. Like if I give, let's say, a Node.js developer Grafana the dashboard that we use to monitor production, that person would rightfully say, what the heck is going on? Kind of like, there are like 57 different graphs and I have no idea what's going on, right? I don't need that. So it's all about creating new services, and those services will interact behind the scenes with whichever tools you're using. That's all fine. I'm not advocating removing anything. I'm just advocating about creating additional layers on top of it that will make things easier for everybody. And if you jump into tooling, then yes, we will talk about, hey, what is going to be our front end? Could be Backstage, could be Port. What is going to be our backend? Now, with backend, I'm a bit more, how to say it, religious or more tougher, or leave people less choices.
Can we use the word?
I am biased. I am biased, but before I get to the biased part, something that I feel that I'm not biased, and that's that the only decent way today to build a backend that exposes an API and make it in a way standard is Kubernetes, right? I don't care how, right? There are a zillion tools. I can give you 5 recommendations for anything you want, but please use Kubernetes. Don't come up with your own custom thing, because we all agree that Kubernetes is the standard. Can you just build on top of it?
I mean, there would be people thinking, okay, I can deploy an application that's also building on top of Kubernetes, but maybe I can write a custom resource definition and a controller that's also building on top of Kubernetes. Because
exactly.
we don't have any definition. Like you said, we have been building services for making lives of someone easier, be it a customer who's outside, internal. I can also give you an example that maybe for you, it was Jenkins you were using as an internal developer platform because it helped you do something by keeping the abstraction. For me, it could be an Ansible Tower survey and a job template where I just give the user what's a name, the service, the Git repository, and just things like that. And backend, they don't need to care about. My Ansible could talk to Jenkins, that talks to cloud, that spawns up a job, that does the deployment. It doesn't matter. They just should not know about it. That should be.
I mean, for the end user, going back to my example about highways, I don't know what they're built on. True. You can tell they're made of plastic. I don't know. I don't care. I really honestly don't. So if you have that interface and behind the scenes is Jenkins, hey, go for it. Great. Your users don't care.
Absolutely. So I think the example that you also took about the front end, the back end, and some sort of storage, could it be a database and anything? I think everyone can relate to it. It's a classic 3-tier application. Now, of course, you can break it down to a lot more. But whenever you hear API first approach, that's what I think, Victor, you're also trying to say, that whenever you're writing a function, don't give me a lot of data. Just give me, kind of an API. You hit an API, you get some response back. That's exactly what you need. Now, how do you consume that response is on top of the user, maybe a CLI or a web UI, however they do. But you cannot sell a very nice looking car if that doesn't run, which is essentially, you cannot have a very good UI and it doesn't do anything. I'm clicking the button, nothing is happening. What's going on? You can't do that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree to that. The question that still remains with me, Victor, is if somebody, let's say you or I'm also not, I've been here like 6-7 years, not very old, not very young as well. But I was here when a time, maybe before COVID, when things were like picking up. It was not there when they are now, but I'm not also very in the field as much as you are. The problem is people who are starting their DevOps journey now, maybe even they are in the industry for so long, maybe a developer, for example, if they even try to think, okay, maybe I will learn what these guys are doing, because I still see a clear separation of developer and operators. And there's a reason for that. What I feel is a human cognitive ability. how much can I learn in a day, right? Because so many tools are there. You talk about infrastructure, there is so many tools. You talk about cloud, you have offerings. You talk about automation, you talk about containers and Kubernetes. So out of all of this wild west that's going on, how do you think that the teams should be approaching to select the right tool? Of course, it depends. A lot of answers would be it depends on the kind of problem that you're solving. But if you were to give an advice to someone who's now upscaling or they are coming up new, based on how the future might look like, what would you ask them to, hey, you know what, guys, at least this, and this is your bread and butter. You will not survive without it. You have to know all of that. I know this might be a difficult one, or I don't know, how do you say that, but it's up to you.
So let me start by saying that depending on where you land, in which company you get employment, things will differ greatly. So if I say AWS, you might be working in a company that uses on-prem or Azure, right? That all those things differ. But there are two things to me important. First is, and this is the thing that many newbies I think fail, is that don't go for shiny things, learn the basics, right? Kind of understand how Linux works inside out. You might never touch Linux in your life, ever, directly. But then when you jump into containers, you will discover, hey, actually, yeah, that's Linux. No, Kubernetes, again, that's Linux. All those things.
Yeah, exactly.
All those things are based on the same principles, whether you see them or no, right? Kind of small commands that are very specialized in something, piping one to another, and so on and so forth, right? So learn the basics. And now the problem is that when you say learn the basics are never going to give you a job. You cannot say, hey, I know how to write some basic shell scripting and I know how to execute commands in Linux and what's not, right? That's not going to give you a job, but that's going to enable you to learn things that will give you a job, right? And speaking of things that will give you a job, especially since you cannot know what is required from you in a future company, right? Maybe that company is using mainframe, and then there is nothing that can prepare you for that, right? But there are, and I think that this is new. This is something that we haven't had in the past, like until maybe 10 years ago, that now we have standards. We haven't had them before, right? I already mentioned Kubernetes. To me, Kubernetes is one of the standards. This is the first time of history of this industry that almost everybody agreed that we are going to use Kubernetes API, right? What we do in Kubernetes might differ greatly, right? I might be using Kubernetes with Crossplane to manage infrastructure. You might be using Kubernetes to deploy applications. Somebody else might be using Kubernetes with let's say, KubeVirt to manage virtual machines, right? There are many. We are not going to use it for the same purpose, but we are all agreeing that that's the standard. And that's important because all the new and funky solutions that are coming are built on top of that standard, right?
True.
If you look at new open source projects, at least in the operational area, they're all on Kubernetes, right? For a reason. Another good example of something that is worthwhile, again, it all depends on what you want to do in life, but another good example of a standard is OpenTelemetry, right? Before we had to figure out, Datadog, something, this is how it works. I don't care about those things at all anymore, right? I need to understand how API of OpenTelemetry works.
True.
So focus on standards and basics first, then standards, Kubernetes, OpenTelemetry, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I had so in my office, I think a couple of weeks ago, we had a CNCF meetup, which was hosted by Trivago. And there was a software engineer from Red Hat. He came up with a talk about OpenTelemetry. And I was so fascinated by, without doing a lot in your code, you could just call the APIs and you get the traces of your applications, which was, wow, that's super fun. So I definitely see that now there are standards and things are a lot more easier. The problem is there's a lot more that you have to now study as you're coming up as an engineer here in this field.
But if I go back with Kubernetes, and I'm using it as an example, right? There are many other examples, but if you understand truly how Kubernetes works, right? You probably already know 80% of what you need to know for any of the thousands of tools that are running on top of it, right? Because everything becomes so easy. Okay, if you right now give me some tool that I never saw that is built to be Kubernetes native, I can figure it out probably in no time. Not because I'm a genius, but because I understand how it works. Kind of like it's same thing like in the past. I could have said the same thing about Linux, right? Whether you have Debian or Ubuntu or RHEL, doesn't matter. Kind of, if you understand how Linux works, everything else is easy. I mean, everything else that is Linux related, right?
Absolutely. I mean, then you could do any sorts of customizations. As you said, there are so many tools coming up on top of Kubernetes. And I think the way we see, or a lot of people also see Kubernetes now, again, guys, this has been a de facto. We have been talking about Kubernetes and the tool you should learn. So get the hint, it is Kubernetes that you have to learn. There's no way going around it. You would find yourself working in it, whether you are a cloud support engineer, whether you are a DevOps platform, SRE, call it yourself, anything. But you would be finding yourself fighting with Kubernetes. Either you love it or you fight it. I would rather say you should love it. And the thing about Kubernetes that I really like about is it's kind of like an operating system for any of your applications. It can manage your network, it can manage your storage, it can manage your compute, it can manage your scheduling. What more do you want? And any sorts of applications really you can work. So that's kind of like super cool with it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't like using the word application in the context of Kubernetes because I feel that it is misleading. I think that specifically containers, I think that that's simply the first implementation in Kubernetes, more like a proof of concept than anything else. Kubernetes, if not from the beginning, then very early on, is more than what you just said. It's an extensible API, right?
True.
With all the mechanisms baked in, kind of, we talked about storage before. We already have storage baked in. We know how to do that, and so on and so forth. So it's extensible API, and how you extend it and what it becomes, it's really up to you or up to the vendor whose solution you're taking, right?
Absolutely.
I don't know if you saw like one interesting project, for example, is KCP, which cannot run containers. It's a Kubernetes that cannot run containers, right? It serves very, very different purpose, but it's still Kubernetes.
Okay. I already have started feeling a bit biased towards it, but I would check that out later. Because for me, Kubernetes has to run containers. What? But maybe this is the extensibility you can do with that.
Yeah, I mean, today or tomorrow, Wasm, right? Or Wasm is not container, and it still runs your application. Or let's say that when you create an application, you're probably going to create, at least in a basic level, you're going to have a deployment, you're going to have ingress and service, right? Now, what does the ingress do? Ingress manages infrastructure. Almost nobody thinks of it in that terms, but ingress manages your external load balancer. That's what it does. No direct relation with your application. Of course, I mean, the purpose is to forward request to your application, but it manages infrastructure. Your application might be having volumes, right, attached to it. Most likely, at least something is going to have volumes. So your Kubernetes is managing external storage, right? So there are many, many things that it does, and it's almost misleading to think of it as containers only, right?
True, absolutely. And that's what I think, that if a developer tries to come on this side of the wall, which is maybe the wall is not as strong as it was before, but it's still there. I believe it's still there. And there's always going to be that. Either you go to the newer terms as platform engineering, you're still doing infrastructure, and a developer is still coding things. These silos.
I'm going to say something very, very unpopular and maybe confusing, but I will say that I am not in favor of removing the silos and the walls. I don't mind the walls at all. What I do mind is when people on the other side of the wall do not build a door in that wall, right? That's the API. That's the services I was talking about, right? I shop a lot on Amazon, right? For me, Amazon folks are the silo. I never get into contact with them. Maybe if something goes wrong and I contact support, right? And I have no desire for them ever to be anything but a silo. I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear them. I don't want to talk to them.
True.
Now, what makes difference between, let's say, Amazon silo, and some silos in the companies that they built everything I need to shop, kind of to buy whatever I'm buying on Amazon, right? As long as your silo can expose to other silos, other people, things as a service that they can consume, I don't mind the wall at all.
All right. I think rather than saying let's have no silos, I think we should say let's have routable or communicable silos there. You do what
exactly.
you do, I do what I do, and let's just be able to communicate effectively.
Exactly.
True. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it should be the case as well, because you can never fill, one person can never be a proper developer and a proper infrastructure. That's just not going to be the case.
Even within those two categories, no person can be only operations or operations in general. You need to nobody can know in depth Azure and Google Cloud and AWS at the same time. Nobody can be a security expert and know Kubernetes in depth as well. It's not only those two divisions. Within those we have zillion other divisions, and that's okay. We want people to be specialized.
Absolutely. And I think I can, one incident that happened today itself is I was sitting with the developers. So we have a new application which is coming up on our platform, and we were talking to them about it that, hey guys, do you want on-call support for this one? Because we do on-call for the infrastructure. Should something go wrong, we do have a rotation there going on. And then the first thing that I was told to ask them is, how do I fix it? Because I don't know the application. If at 2 o'clock something goes wrong, I get an alert from your application, give me the exact details of what are the actionable items. So I'm not an expert in their application, but it has to be, there's still a silo. You feel, I don't know what they're doing. That's silo. But to be able to do what needs to be done in these cases, you have to give me a run book. So there has to be effective communication within people as well as within services that's an IDP that we talked about.
Exactly. And also, in ideal situation, I'm repeating ideal because almost nobody can get there, right? I think that the team that owns the application should be able to take care of that application, not somebody else, right? And what usually prevents people from taking care of their application, even in production, right, is that they don't have the tools and the means to do that, right? Just as you as an ops person don't know what that application is, and you will never know it in depth, right? That person also doesn't understand your system, right? Because it's overwhelming. But if we expose those things through, again, as services, kind of like, what do I need to own this application? That's the question that we all need to ask. What do we need to be self-sufficient? I own this application, it's mine. You don't have to touch it. I just don't know how to do it if you give me the low-level primitive. If you say, hey, here's the access to AWS, root account, right? Admin account, go fix it. I cannot do that like that, right?
Absolutely. True that. And I mean, if you give a developer a root account for AWS with a credit card associated to it, that's a disaster. You are looking for a big bill.
I mentioned earlier me traveling from Barcelona to where I am right now with a car, right? Let me use the same analogy, right? If let's say that my car stopped on a highway, right, because the tire is got punched, I can change the tire myself. It's not hard. It's relatively easy, right? Now, if the motor broke, then I know, then I have very clear indication, this is something that you cannot fix, right? This goes directly to the mechanic, right? So we need to, now it would be silly for me to call the mechanic to travel for 2 hours to come and change the tire for me, right?
Absolutely.
So we need to figure out what are the things that I can do to fix my car if it stops working, and what are the things that are unfixable by me. And I feel that we go either in one of the two extremes, either whatever happens. If you're out of gas, you call the mechanic. No, that's silly. I can go to a gas station. Don't tell me that I have to do that. I don't have to call the guy or the girl. Or the other extreme, you cannot call anybody, figure it out yourself, right? We need to find that balance of what is it that you can fix and what is it that you can't.
Absolutely. I think this is also an example of a shared responsibility where I own the application, and I would believe that the infrastructure where it is running, that's going to be up and running. And that's a responsibility for somebody else to manage, not me. I would assume this is going to stay all year round for a lot of long time, so I can own the application there. If anything happens in that app, sure, I'm the guy. I can fix it because I know it. But
Exactly.
if your node breaks down in Kubernetes, whoa, that's not on me. So that is a shared responsibility we should look forward to.
Exactly. And where we usually fail is that we don't have, normally in majority of companies, we don't have clear information about what is it. Kind of, right? Okay, its application is misbehaving, kind of like, or the infrastructure is misbehaving, kind of. Usually we don't have those types of data that would clearly say, hey, it's you or it's you. Usually it's, let's all get together and figure it out.
That's what happens. A lot of times I've seen that happening. So we are still figuring out who's at fault here. I mean, not to blame because it has to be blameless, but is it me who did it, or is it your application who's really funky? So to figure that out could actually be a problem. But on the contrary, I might go ahead and say, but these sessions, when you're spending time with developers, you also get to learn a lot of things, which will be preparing you better for something that might happen like this in the future, because things can repeat itself. So it's once in a while, I would really be okay with it. If I'm the on-call engineer and I have to spend some time with the developer, but it's for my own interest, for my own learning. That's not the golden path to production. There has to be clear definitions of who owns what.
Look, I have a strong belief that the only way to be truly successful is to have the product mentality, right? You have a product for somebody, and that somebody can be random people on the streets, or it can be developers, right? If you're into infrastructure, developers are your customers. Let's make it clear, kind of like they are your customers. And if I speak in general terms, nobody can be successful with a product without knowing well what the customers need, kind of like. So just as developers need to actually do a lot of exploration to figure out what their end users really want, and fail many times until you finally figure out and deliver what people need. The same thing goes for internal, let's say, ops people, right? You need to understand what they need.
True, absolutely.
Now, that does not mean that every single person needs to spend weeks or months doing surveys and what's not, right? You can have a product owner, you can have somebody in your team but somebody needs to figure out what people need. Otherwise, it's going to be a failure.
Absolutely. I mean, the engineer in AWS can make sure my VM stays up even in case of a host being down, live migration. But if I'm running Apache internally and I use a wrong port number, that's on me. They're not going to help me with it. I should know better.
That's actually a very good example of what I spoke before. There is almost never a doubt, if you use AWS, whether it's something that you need to fix or whether it's something that AWS needs to fix. There is rarely ever that doubt, right?
Then I check my security group. Then I check, do I even have a public IP? Then I check my instance inside. Absolutely true. So Victor, my next question would be nothing related to technology that we have been speaking of, but more on the market. I keep on hearing from a lot of people are now saying that there are no jobs at the moment for DevOps, but you go to LinkedIn, you go to these job postings and you see tons of jobs coming out. And I've also taken a lot of interviews, and I've heard who take interviews that there are no people with skills. So on one hand, there are people who are claiming we don't have jobs enough. And on the other hand, there are people who are saying, we have been looking for a guy for 5-6 months. We didn't find it because of the skill gap. So what is your take on that? Because I'm sure you also might have been here and the other side of the table. So how do you feel about it now?
To begin with, I feel that this is a temporary thing. I don't believe it's going to last because software is going to continue there is going to continue to be bigger demand than offer, except maybe right now, right? It's a strange situation we're in. But it is true that for some people it's hard to find a job. I feel, and I don't have data to back this up, right, that most affected are really juniors, because a lot of people got fired, but at least among my circle, and this is really anecdotal, I cannot prove this, experienced people, I don't know anybody who is truly experienced and is out of job for a long time right now, right? But yeah, a lot of downsizing happened, and usually less experienced people are more affected, right? Which is a very, very bad thing. But that's how it is. And also there is another potentially problematic thing that there is more and more remote work. And I work remotely. I love remote, and I'm not saying that everybody does or should like it. But remote work is relatively negatively affecting also younger people, right? Because once you're experienced, you have some years, 5 years, 10 years in your belt, you can work remotely, because remotely usually means, hey, thank you for joining our company, go, right? There is nobody to help you out. I mean, I'm exaggerating. Of course, there are people to help you out, but it's a very different feeling than when you're in the office and you can spend literally face-to-face time with more experienced people that will walk you in and stuff like that. The remote work is also negatively affecting less experienced people, simply because, like, you know, I work in a small company. It would be very hard for us to hire somebody that would require a month of training or something like that, right? Simply because there is nobody around. Everybody is running and everybody is somewhere else, right?
I mean, in the end, we are not a training company. If you join a company that is a product based, they're not going to make you sit for 1 month, have somebody dedicated for you training you. That's not going to happen. You have to maybe.
You still need kind of, everybody started sometime, right? Kind of, you still need to, I mean, there are people who are not experienced, and that's normal. Kind of, nobody was born experienced. I wasn't experienced as well at some moment, right? And it's very helpful to have somebody who is helping you out and driving that growth. It's just that it's a bit harder with remote work, and on top of that, with complicated work relation situation right now.
I think,
but
because
here's the thing. Sorry for interrupting. Whomever is now having trouble finding work, the best you can do, even if you do have work, that's invest in yourself. And the best way to invest in yourself is not only to learn, but to learn things in a way that is public, that is visible, right? Join an open source project, right? I'm the first one. I would hire somebody who can show me a Git user and say, this is what I do. Go and check it out, rather than somebody who is working in, silently, nobody can see. The best thing you can do is join a project, help out, do some work that is visible, and things are going to be much easier after that.
Absolutely. And while you cannot start contributing to a project, maybe learn in public, show what you're doing, that's also would be
and even contributing, everybody can contribute to a project. Now, if you're not experienced, maybe that will be on documentation first, maybe grammatical errors. Kind of, there is always something that somebody can contribute to a project, right? Now, you can jump in right away today and make a pull request that will drastically change Kubernetes, but you need a lot of experience for that.
Absolutely.
Or you can say start from whatever is the most basic, and then go up from there. Many projects, ours included, Crossplane, we have first time issues, right? Kind of like we mark issues that are for people that are not already experienced with it. Everybody can contribute.
Absolutely. I think we have a question, or rather, I would just have one last question, or maybe just take this one. Let's say, machine learning DevOps is becoming a popular word. I mean, AI, ML, you put anything in DevOps, you have got DevSEC Ops, you have got Dev whatever Ops nowadays. Any insight where this might lead us? What is your take on that one? Would we still be using Kubernetes for that, though? That's important.
I mean, it will continue leading us where we were going already for a very, very long time, even though not with AI, right? We all the time we're getting tools that make some type of action, some type of tasks easy, irrelevant, and then we can focus on more complicated things, right? We were doing that, in the past with Dreamweaver. Nobody even knows what it is right now, but it was a tool long time ago that you can drag and drop things and create web pages, right? So from the perspective of software development, I will not even use the word DevOps, but in general, software development, to me, AI just continues where we left, right? Makes things easier so that we can spend less time on more trivial things and more time on more complicated things, right? And I'm sure that we can see that already with, let's say, GitHub Copilot and many others, right? It's helping a lot. And it will get much bigger not long from now. Now, what I'm not that interested in myself is that type of help that we're seeing right now. Something can help me write code better, right? Or something like that. Or can help me answer the questions I have about this or that. That's very useful. That's great. But to me, that's just the beginning. Where I want us to go, and when I'm sure that we will go, is AI in the future that I cannot define, taking over operations and doing things that we are doing right now. If this application goes down because it's out of memory, I learned that I can restart it and fix it, right? Maybe not as a permanent fix, but so I think that AI will take away common operations so that we can focus on less common ones. Because let's face it, whomever was in ops or DevOps or whatever, there are things that you do over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? And I feel that we will see in some future AI doing operations as well. But that's not coming anytime soon because there is no trust in that yet. And also, the last thing I'm going to say is that it's very, very, very hard to navigate that landscape today, right? Because it's such a hype that it's full of ridiculously bad solutions, and it's very hard to distinguish what makes sense and what doesn't. I would say that for every one that you find that it makes sense, there are 99 that are just silly, They're going to disappear soon. And that's the same thing with every hype, right?
Absolutely true. I think we have one more. I love this question, actually. Is there a future of DevSEC Ops, asking a cybersecurity engineer transitioning into DevOps?
I don't like the expressions like the DevSEC Ops, and I've heard Dev Test Ops, and that Test Ops, whatever.
Dev XYZ Ops, fill in the blanks.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's confusing. What does matter from my perspective, going back to what I said before, you're you're specialized in something. First, you need to specialize. Let's face it, there is no such thing. If you go back in time when it was popular to be full stack developer, I never believed that there is such a thing as full stack developer. It's just too much, right? And the same thing goes for DevSEC Ops or whatever you want to say. What I do care about is that you learn something, you specialize in something, let's say security. And then the next step is how can I enable people to be secure, right? Call it whatever you want. I honestly don't care about the name, but don't tell people, and I'm using security as example. Same thing can be said for other areas. Don't tell people, hey, you cannot do that. No. That's bad. You're acting as a policeman, right?
Sure.
Create means to tools, processes, whatever you want to make people secure, to deploy applications securely. That's all I want to see. Now, if you want to call it DevSEC Ops, cool. I don't care.
Yeah, there's no need to put a label on that. I mean, if I'm working as a platform system, even a system administrator, and I see a vulnerability that should be patched, I am actually working towards security. So, would you label me as a DevSecOps engineer? There's no need for that, really. That's my job. Security should be built in, not it should be built in in everything.
Exactly.
Thanks, guys. I'm not the teacher that's come to ruin the party and stop the flow, right? I just wanted to ask a question based on a question that's been asked, right? and I'm kind of coming at it from a different way because obviously, as you know, I'm Chief Commercial Officer here. My role is really to commercialize what we do, to kind of sit back and look at the landscape in terms of solutions that address the future of work as it pertains to different industries, but particularly tech roles. And someone asked a question in the chat, and he talked about securing a job and experience. He used those two words, right, in the context. But Victor, this is for you specifically. You said earlier on, when it comes to job finding, those with experience are not really having problems. And I tend to agree because we get a lot of confirmation still from people that have done the advanced, done our externship and stuff, and are getting roles fairly easy after understanding how it is to do interviews and stuff. But my question to you is when you say experience, what do you mean? It seems like a silly question, but I would like for you to extrapolate. Is it a function of time, or what else is at play when you talk about this? And there are some inferences you made by the answers you gave earlier on, but I would like you to address that more broadly because he addresses many questions that cascade out of that.
I mean, the time is relative. I cannot answer whether that means 2 years experience, 1 year, or 3 decades. I cannot say that. But I would define it as demonstratable experience, right? First, and demonstratable real-world experience, right? So you just learning something on your own is not enough because, whatever you learn until you face it in production, you don't know how it works, right? And demonstratable in terms like, and that's why I was referring to open source. There are many other means, right? Kind of, you can do something that is visible because that will help your potential employers have an easier time choosing you, right? A long time ago, when I was in one of the cases when I was hiring myself, and this is going to sound awful what I'm going to say. I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but I had many applicants, and the first question I asked everybody is kind of, and not face-to-face, but through email. Okay, what is your GitHub account? Simply because I have 100, kind of like, and everybody lies on their CV, right? But if you give me a GitHub account, I can spend 15 minutes. I don't need more to see actually whether this is worthwhile continuing, right? I'm not saying that everybody does that. I know that I could be labeled as an evil person in that scenario. But if you can do something in public, that helps a lot.
Yes, you want to add to that before I do my shameless shill of the work that we do here? Do you want to respond to that?
No, I think if I would want to hire someone, either you ask for the GitHub account, as Victor said, or maybe you ask them for a running project that they might have, and they can explain to me what architecture do they have. Because some way he or I or anyone would want to see what you can build, what you have built, rather than your resume. You might be a very driven individual on your resume, but we want to see how driven you are when it comes to actually doing the work done. I think that's also an example that you could go. Being experienced, for example, you know how we have the cohort where we have these projects for our learners where they build a 3-tier application. That's a very good example of how do you find a person who's experienced. If I would say, if somebody comes to me and says, I cannot reach my EC2 instance, for me, a person who would be experienced enough if he knows, okay, I am at my home, I need to talk to the public IP. First of all, do I have a public IP? Second, if I have a public IP on the instance, has it been allowed from a security group? Second thing. Third, if it's being allowed, that means I can reach the instance. Is the service even running there or not? So these things are common sense, but that only comes after experience, and you learn, you put your hours in there. So there was a question, what would you do as a newer who's a DevOps engineer? Put your hours in there. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, the reason I was asking you, Victor, and I'll say this at this point, you, I, and Dare need to kind of, take a conversation offline because I'd love to get your feedback. Because obviously you're aware the methodology we focus on at Dare.io is around projects and delivering projects and having your 90-odd projects, capstone projects, and the rest of it, right? But what you may not be aware, I don't know if you and Dare had the conversation about the live production environment that we extended the journeys, particularly to address the issue that you mentioned, i.e. the gap between theory and practical, and we're building what we like to call the situational fluency around all that hits the fan and all the things that go wrong and all the ways you can miscommunicate value in what you've done, all the cultural nuances, the ceremonies associated with that, right? And that's something that kind of comes further after the advanced stage. And so we're still doing that. And we're even doing fantastic work around developing, funny you say that, a skill-based CV, which actually captures soft skills, technical skills, your public work, and brings it into a hybrid environment that people like you can actually review and get more context as to what people can do. So, I'm glad we're along the same lines in trying to expedite and redefine what experience means, but in a way that's meaningful for you, the hiring company. So that's something that we're giving our externs the opportunities to kind of participate in. And so it would be great to get your feedback on that. I just wanted to say that because it needs to be said, right? And I didn't pay you to lead us to this point. It just kind of happened, didn't it? I've got another question.
Wait, you're not paying us?
No, sorry, I'm not paying you.
Getting paid for that.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Man.
I'm sure Darius the paymaster. I'll get him to sort something out for you. But okay, so this is a question that it resonates across the piece, and I'll lay it out there for you guys to also kind of comment on as well, if you could.
So for my strong recommendation, I know that DevOps as a term is good for hiring. It pays better than something else and so on and so forth. My recommendation is forget about DevOps. Forget about that. Learn something. I mentioned before, Linux, Kubernetes, cloud, AWS, I don't know. Learn something, right? Figure out what you want to specialize, right? DevOps comes easy. You can even say that, hey, DevOps, you become automatically DevOps with sufficient experience in certain things, right?
It's kind of true.
Learn those things. Forget about DevOps. I would even say that if there is such a thing as a DevOps engineer, which we can have a long debate where I would claim that there isn't. If there is such a thing as DevOps engineer, the only way to describe it would be a person with a lot of experience.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Across multiple tools. Absolutely. Awesome. Guys, I don't know if you've got any more questions. This is expensive time we've got here. We need to make the most of it. We've kind of gone over our hours limit, but we'll give you a few more minutes to ask any other questions. Sure, but I don't know if there's any last questions you want to ask as we close out the conversation. I know there were one or two more.
Oh, I am enjoying this. I have many questions that I can ask, but I think for the time, maybe I would take the questions from one of our learners here, one of our listeners here. They're saying, how do a beginner get a remote DevOps job since most companies want experienced and highly skilled DevOps engineers? From my point of view, Victor, getting a remote job is 10 times more difficult than getting a job in your own area or your city. What do you think about it?
Yeah, depends where you live. So let's start with that, right? But if you guys are in UK, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
I would strongly recommend to go look for an office job rather than remote. I would strongly if you're a newbie, right? Because it's hard to work remote. It's very pleasurable. I love working remote. It would be very hard for me to go back to the office. But not as if you're starting. I strongly recommend the office because you learn so much more by being surrounded by physical people. Now, there is the other side of the coin, just to be clear. In certain other parts where opportunities are fewer, where you are, then remote, of course, is
the default.
Is a great option, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of successes to that effect. But, you kind of need to have as much experience. The more remote you are, the more experience you need to demonstrate. Am I right or am I right?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's kind of the things that we need to kind of sort out. We've got one more question. I'll just put it on here and then we'll wrap up. And just let you guys, whichever you want to answer that.
Oh, okay. So very quickly, a quick one. The way I see it, DevOps is more a cultural change, right? How can we enable people to be in control of whatever they're doing, right? So I don't know, you're not just a developer. How can you deploy in production without bothering somebody else, right? Or waiting for somebody else. It's about removing silos, even though I said before that we don't need it, but that's a separate subject and so on. So it's a cultural change, right? That's why I said before that I could argue for a long time that I'm not sure that there should be such a thing as DevOps engineer, right? Platform engineer is more concrete, right? We know what we're building. We're building a platform, right? Kind of, it's a product that we are building. So it's when platform engineer from that perspective, that would also be a long story. But we know what it is, right? Kind of, or we're trying to figure out what it is, and so on and so forth. It's much more concrete. And DevOps can be anything. I mean, I know people who, I'm DevOps. I know Jenkins, right? Or DevOps, Kubernetes. It can be anything. It really can be anything. Platform is more specific. We are creating a set of services that can be consumed with others to accomplish certain tasks that they are not experienced in.
True, absolutely.
Shub, do you want to lead on this? Another question?
I think I can take this one because a lot of my friends back. So I'm living in Germany and I moved here a couple of months ago, I think 8-9 months ago. But back when I was in India, I had so many friends who did not like coding. And that was the reason why they chose quote unquote DevOps, because there have been people who have told them, you don't do so much coding when you come to DevOps. It's infrastructure you do. You work with YAML, you work with CLIs, but there's less coding compared to an application developer, which to an extent might be true depending upon what you do in DevOps. Again, you might be a backend engineer extending Kubernetes. Sure, you're going to be coding all day. But the question is, do one need to learn software development, software engineer, or Python programming before learning DevOps engineering? For that, my answer is you can play football in your genes, but you wouldn't be playing with the full potential that you have. So that's always the case. I mean, you can do DevOps. Yes, you could find your ways around it even if you don't do programming, hardcore programming. I'm not talking about scripting. Scripting and programming are two different things. You might still need to do scripting, which is in Python or whatever language you work with. But it pays off to know the programming stack. It really pays off so that you can troubleshoot yourself with the application that the developer is going to give you. You could probably go in there, find the flaws yourself, and fix them as soon as possible because it's a shared responsibility as well. That's my take on that, Victor.
You know that, and this is me showing that I'm old. We had the same conversations in the past about testing. Can a tester not program, not write code? And then conversation stuff like that. Now it's more or less clear. No, you cannot, right? You don't have to spend 8 hours every day writing code. Fair enough. And you can never write any line of code, but you will be a lousy tester, right? Because it's not that you cannot do, but so many things are easier when you know how to write code. I'm going to deviate a bit, even though I agree with you. I don't care at this point even whether by writing code we talk about shell scripting or Python or Go or whatever. But there are so many things that you will spend so much more time doing if you don't know how to write code. And things become so much easier.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. It looks like a fantastic segue to the evening. Questions have kind of stalled somewhat, and I'm keen to give you back your time, or at least take that time one-on-one with Darren and talk through some of the work we're doing to solve some of the problems that we collectively face in the industry. But on that note, just a little bit over time, I would like to thank you for your time, both of you, for stepping in and helping us out at this point in time. It's been super helpful, even for someone like me. I'm an OG, but I saw the solutions that were built. I was never on the back end building anything. So when you talk about Dreamweaver and stuff like that, I still remember. Telco background is where I come from. But it's been super helpful to understand how the landscape currently looks, the conversations around tools, the approach to learning, the appreciation of the fundamentals, which is a discipline that goes across many things if you want to be excellent. And I was consistent here. And I feel it's been super valuable. This recording will be available afterwards. Happy to share it with you as well, Victor, as well. But really appreciate your time. And I wish you both a fantastic and good evening. And also to those that have attended. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Victor.
Take care. Bye.